Do you ever notice that when your mind starts to wander at night or in the quiet moments, it's not always replaying the mistakes you made, but maybe the moments you didn't act on something that you felt? It's not the thing you said that you regret, but the thing you didn't say. Or it's not the choice you made, but the one you felt pulled towards and you talked yourself out of. That's usually when the phrase that starts ringing in your head that hindsight is 2020. It's not that we are upset with ourselves for being reckless, but more disappointed because somewhere in us we already knew. And today we are going to talk about our impulse and intuition. Hello, friend, and welcome to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and I'll be your coach. If you are curious about mindfulness, healing, and practical habits that actually work, you're in the right place because here we focus on simple but powerful practices grounded in ancient wisdom and modern science to care for both our minds and bodies. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe before you head out so you don't miss what's next. So, when you're in a moment that demands your attention and your action, how do you tell the difference between intuition and impulse? They sound similar, and they can both come to us quickly. They both feel convincing. So let's talk about it. On the surface, intuition is often described as the ability to understand something immediately without conscious reasoning. It's instinctive, that sense of knowing that doesn't come from a step by step thought process. Impulse, on the other hand, it's also sudden, but it shows up as an urge. We want to act quickly, often without considering the consequences, and usually in response to discomfort, desire, or emotional intensity. So it's easy to see where the two can get confusing. Both arrive fast, both bypass any deliberation in our mind, and both feel internal. But that's where their similarities end. Impulsive actions are usually about relief. It's something that will bring us a quick release to the situation we're in at the moment. Maybe to discharge tension, like an angry outburst, or to find a sense of comfort or control, like focusing on being right. And sometimes they can feel really good in the moment, but more often than not, they come with long term regret. Sometimes the impulse isn't explosive. Sometimes it's the urge to calm down quickly, to forgive too fast, or to smooth things over so that we don't have to feel discomfort. Intuition does not promise relief. In fact, it often asks us to do something outside of our comfort zone. Maybe it means taking the path that feels challenging, unfamiliar, or even a little bit scary. But more often than not, that's the path where opportunities we couldn't previously see begin to open up. One way to look at it is that impulse demands relief, while intuition asks for courage. And discernment is the muscle that separates courage from reactivity. Over the next couple of weeks, we are going to experiment with that, not philosophically, but practically. And here's where the mindfulness comes in because when we start listening inward, whether through meditation, body scans, or even just a brief pause in the middle of a hectic day, we often notice sensations, emotions, and thoughts. We get all this helpful information, but just because we have that information doesn't mean we know what to do with it. Awareness is the first step, not the final instruction or direction. Maybe when you take that moment to look inward, you notice anger, fear, excitement, or tension in the body. Like I've said before, our minds are problem solving machines. So they get this little bit of information and they want to act immediately. And that is where our discernment matters. A great way to investigate ourselves further is by asking, what is this thought or urge connected to? Impulse is usually tied to sensation or short term payoff. It's that compulsion to snap at the other person, to send a text you know you're going to regret later, or having an angry outburst just to release the pressure. Impulses want immediate comfort like scrolling, eating, spending, numbing, or distracting ourselves. They're driven by our egoic mind. It wants to win at all costs, like being right, even if it damages a relationship. It wants to punish so that we retaliate for something that feels unfair or hurtful. Or it wants an escape, avoidance, checking out, and just not having to deal with a thing at all. Impulse feels tight, like we only have one option, telling us we have to act now or something bad will happen. And intuition feels different. It's quieter, it's more spacious, and it doesn't always feel good in an easy, satiating way. And it's not always calm, but it has a sense of alignment to it. And even when it's uncomfortable, there's often a sense of clarity underneath it. Another way to distinguish the two is to look at the motivation driving it. If a thought pops in that's underlying purpose is to enact revenge, humiliate another, or that urge like, I'll show them, it's a desire to win for the moment regardless of the collateral damage. Intuition tends to lead to boundaries that come from clarity, not aggression. There's not a driving force to hurt another person or dominate a situation. It can lead to compassion, precision, and better long-term outcomes. It's a quiet strength without the backlash. And intuition can show up in a lot of ways. Maybe it's an image that pops in your mind, or a felt sense in your body, or a sudden moment of clarity like, oh, that's it, that type of realization. It may even come up as a shift in our attention, like now we're seeing something that we didn't even see before. Interestingly enough, even philosophers struggle to explain intuition clearly. Some say it's an embodied intelligence, others say it's just pattern recognition, and some describe it as contact with something larger than ourselves. It's like trying to describe an ocean to someone who has only ever seen desert. As I have mentioned, intuition asks us to step out of our comfort zones, which means also out of our patterns, which is a good thing, even when it's scary, because as safe as they can feel, they are limiting. The mind loves familiarity, even if it's painful. So when intuition nudges us towards change, we sometimes dismiss it. And one of the easiest ways to dismiss it is to label it an impulse. If we call it an impulse, we get to justify ignoring it. But the more we listen, the braver we become. And each time we listen to our intuition, not only do we build courage, we build self trust. Now, let's bring in the emotion layer in here because really it's where intuition and impulse get tangled. Emotions give us data and information, but not direction, like anger, which is often misunderstood. Anger helps us identify our values and establish boundaries, both for ourselves and others. And anger is actually a really important element of healthy relationships. But if we misread our anger, we might distrust the information it's giving us and assume we need to immediately react, or on the opposite end, immediately forgive. Sometimes people use forgiveness as a way to avoid confrontation, as a way to stay comfortable. And that can actually distract us from addressing the issue that created the anger in the first place. Intuition helps us respond to emotion instead of reacting from it. Research even shows that individuals who can regulate their emotions, meaning that they can just notice an emotion without being overwhelmed by it, they tend to have more satisfying relationships. Awareness creates space, and space creates choice. And when we consistently use that space to pause between urge and action, we're practicing discernment. Intuition becomes clearer when we practice discernment consistently. And that, friends, brings me to another point I want to make here. Intuition isn't a gift that some people have and others don't. Like mindfulness, it's a skill that we can sharpen with practice. When we are more present and attentive to detail, we can pick up on patterns more easily. When we are practicing present moment awareness, we notice those subtle cues and shifts in not just ourselves, but in others as well. When we close down emotionally, whether to avoid pain or discomfort, our intuition gets quieter and it doesn't get a chance to learn from nuances. So, developing intuition is really about staying in relationship with our internal experience without rushing to act on it. But since intuition is a skill that we can sharpen with practice, I have some for you today to try out. Of course, mindfulness and meditation help us to notice without immediately reacting. When we practice being present, we are strengthening the part of the brain that recognizes patterns rather than the part that just seeks relief. From a neuroscience perspective, mindfulness helps quiet the default mode network. That's a collective of different regions of the brain that are associated with rumination and the part that's constantly talking about you, that inner narrator. So it quiets that and it increases activity in the regions that are involved in interoception and emotional regulation. And that's important because intuition relies on our ability to notice subtle internal signals without being overwhelmed by them. So, all this to say, if you already have some mindful living practices in your routine, a side effect of those is already going to be stronger intuition. I will also have a guided meditation companion video to go alongside this one, so make sure you check that one out as well. Body awareness is another foundational piece. Our bodies often register information before our minds can articulate it. Tension, ease, heaviness, lightness, warmth, constriction, expansion. These are all forms of data. This doesn't mean every bodily sensation is intuition. But when we're familiar with our internal landscape, we're more likely to notice meaningful shifts. We already have a full body scan workshop available on the Torches page that I will put down in the link in the description. So I won't go too deep into that here, but even brief check-ins throughout the day matter. Pausing for 10 seconds and asking, what do I notice in my body right now? That's enough to start building our fluency. All right, journaling. I know. You already knew this one was coming. See? Your intuition is already getting better. But journaling is a powerful tool, especially when we do it without editing or trying to solve anything too quickly. Just letting out what's there, whatever comes up. Writing supports cognitive reappraisal, meaning it helps us to reinterpret experiences in healthier ways, and it strengthens neural pathways linked to resilience. It helps encode experiences into long term memory, which will make patterns easier to recognize over time. And intuition becomes clearer when we can see those patterns across a longer arc of time instead of just like in a single isolated moment. I'll leave a few body based reflection prompts in the description if you want somewhere to start for your journaling with this. Creative expression is another pathway: art, movement, free writing, just to name a few. These give intuition space to communicate in nonlinear ways. Not everything meaningful arrives as a sentence. Sometimes clarity shows up as rhythm, imagery, or movement. Creative expression provides space for those insights. And solitude matters too, not isolation, but intentional time alone where you're not consuming or performing. The goal isn't to think harder, it's to make space. All right, lastly, I have for you today is active listening, both with others and ourselves. Sometimes we think we are listening, but really, we're listening for our turn to talk, or we are only partly listening while we're also planning what we want to say. Active listening is different. It means we give our full attention to what is being said without immediately interpreting it through our own story, jumping to conclusions, or rehearsing what we're going to say next. From a psychological perspective, active listening reduces cognitive load. That means when we're not busy preparing a response, our brain has more capacity to notice nuances, their tone, their pacing, emotional, and pauses. And those subtle cues are where a lot of intuitive information lives. Active listening also requires emotional regulation. If something triggers you and you immediately react internally, listening ends. But when you notice that reaction without acting on it, even if it's just in your head, you can actually stay present. This is important because intuition isn't just about internal signals. It's also about accurately perceiving what's happening in front of you. Active listening trains this skill. When we are in a conversation, active listening looks like slowing down our responses, letting there be a pause before we speak, reflecting back what was heard rather than what we think the person meant, or even asking clarifying questions instead of making assumptions. It also means listening for what isn't being said, shifts in energy or changes in body language, emotional undertones, and not analyzing or judging, but simply registering. Active listening isn't something we can just do with others, but it's something that we can practice with ourselves as well. That means noticing our own internal dialogue without immediately believing it, hearing a thought without treating it as a command, and allowing emotion to be present without rushing to fix it or justify it. When we listen this way, intuition gets clearer. We're no longer filtering everything through urgency, defensiveness, or self protection. We create space for accurate perception, and that is the foundation of intuitive clarity. A simple 30-second practice you can do once a day is to choose a moment where someone is speaking to you, whether in person or over the phone. As they speak, do three things. First, bring your attention fully to them, not what you're going to say next or deciding if you agree with them. Just pay attention to the sounds of their voice. Then, notice what happens inside you without acting on it, like an urge to interrupt, a tension, or an ease in your body, any emotional reaction. You're not trying to make changes or force a calm, just notice and register what is happening. And lastly, pause before you respond. When we pause between urge and action, we're practicing discernment. Take one full breath in and out before you respond, and let that pause do the work. It allows your nervous system to settle. It reduces reactive responses and gives intuition space to come to the surface. If you practice like this, you'll notice over time that you start picking up on more nuance, more clarity, and more accurate responses with others and yourself. Now, when it comes to practicing intuition more directly, one of the most helpful things you can do is to learn how your intuition speaks to you. For some people, it shows up as that gut feeling, butterflies, or a heaviness, or an expansion or excitement. For others, it comes as images or mental snapshots. And then, even for some others, it's a shift in attention, where something suddenly stands out and won't let go of your attention. There is not one universal language for intention. So your work is to get familiar with yours. Asking better questions helps. Like instead of asking and trying to think on what should I do, ask instead, does this make my world bigger or smaller? Instead of trying to decide if something makes logical sense, ask, where do I feel this in my body? Or you can even try, if I already knew the answer, what would it be? And notice what comes up. These questions bypass overthinking and invite a different kind of knowing. Journaling dreams and recurring thoughts can also be helpful, not because dreams are always symbolic or prophetic. Sometimes they're just the result of a spicy dinner, but because they often highlight emotional patterns and unresolved themes. Over time, this builds awareness of how intuition communicates during rest, not just during decision making. Logic still has its place here. This isn't about abandoning rational thought, it's about balance. Logic is a tool, not the ringleader. When logic dominates, intuition gets drowned out. And when logic supports intuition, decisions tend to be more grounded and sustainable. Finally, one of the most effective ways to build trust in your intuition is to adopt what I call a scientist mindset. Instead of expecting certainty, you can run small experiments. Take small intuitive actions, observe the outcomes, notice how you feel afterward, and gather evidence. This could be as simple as saying no when you would usually default to a yes, especially when you don't want to, or taking a different route, maybe even delaying a response when something feels off. Over time, you start to see patterns. You'll notice when intuition leads to clarity and when impulse leads to messiness. Confidence doesn't come from being right all the time. It comes from repetition, reflection, and learning. And intuition grows when it's practiced gently, consistently, and without the demand for perfection. Okay, I want to circle all this back to where we started. Those moments at night when we replay what we didn't do. That's not your mind trying to punish you. That's your awareness growing. The goal isn't to never ignore our intuition again, but to recognize it sooner, more often, and with more compassion. So instead of asking, am I doing this thing right? Try asking, does this expand my life? This month, we're not chasing certainty. We're practicing listening slowly and repeatedly in small moments. And remember, intuition doesn't guarantee ease and it doesn't promise comfort, but it does offer honesty. And it's that honesty that builds a life that feels more aligned, more spacious, and more inhabitable. All right, friend, let me know in the comments what intuition looks like for you, and make sure you join me next week when we start our 14-day discernment experiment. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me, friend. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.